I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Today's guest is Dara Levan, an author, speaker, and the founder of Every Soul Has a Story, where she talks with people from around the world about the experiences that shape us. Dara is the award-winning author of It Could Be Worse and a contributor to the USA Today best-selling anthology On Being Jewish Now. A graduate of Indiana University with advanced study in communication sciences and disorders at Nova Southeastern University, she brings to her writing a deep understanding of language, connection, family, and the hidden emotional architecture of our lives. Her new novel, Shaken to the Core, asks one of life's most urgent questions. When time becomes uncertain, what do we do with the life we still have? Dara Levan, it's great to be with you.
Terry, that was one of the most beautiful. I'm actually getting Terry. That was such a beautiful introduction. I'm really deeply moved by that. And that was so meaningful. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your fabulous show.
How did you become a writer?
Honestly, I think I was writing and talking since I was in utero. How did I become a writer? Because I have to write. It's like breathing air. And quite honestly, a lot of those early years started in Interlaken in Michigan, which we both share a love of. And we just found out, alumni. And I remember even at 9 years old, I would go behind the lake in the junior girls area. It's called something different now, but I would journal and I'd write my emotions. And then there was a point while I was at Interlaken when my grandfather died, and writing was really soothing for me. And my parents did not fly me home, which was very upsetting. And I understand now as a mother, but he was my everything. My grandparents were so important to me. And I also developed such a love for writing because I always felt like sometimes what we can't say verbally, we can get on the page. And my actual writing career, if we will call it that, now it is, but when I was a little girl, my grandmother had Alzheimer's and she was in a nursing home. And when I was 12 years old, I went to the activities director, they called him, this little man, Jeff. He was the kindest soul. And I remember thinking I would go visit her, and she had this healthy body. She lived till she was almost 89. But her mind, obviously, it was like blank. And I remember even at 12 years old, walking around thinking, these people, they're like these stories inside these bodies and nobody's paying attention. So I asked Jeff if I could please interview the residents. And he said, yes. So I started to interview the residents for his little newsletter. And then in high school, I was very involved in yearbook and the newspaper. And there was a little, you're laughing, you're surprised, right? And then there was this little hometown newspaper that started when Aventura, it used to be called North Miami Beach, where I grew up. Now it's Aventura. And this wonderful woman, Elaine Adler, I hope she hears this. I haven't talked about her in years. I went up to her and I knocked on her door and made an appointment. And I was probably 16. I said, I'd like to write a column for your little newspaper. So it was something silly called Charger Chatter. I was a silly column. And then I ended up going to Indiana University and double majored in journalism and English.
Shaken to the Core is such an amazing title for a book. It commands attention. Without giving away too many spoilers, give us the 411 on the story.
It's about a woman in her late 30s, Joy, who's a family photographer, and her husband, Andre, who's the oldest of 5 boys. They're both from Miami. The book opens in Miami. And this is not a spoiler because it's on the back. Her mother dies suddenly, and her life is shaken. And suddenly, the agreement they had to not have children, it didn't feel like enough anymore to be just behind the lens. And like any marriage, sometimes you have to renegotiate. But then Andre receives devastating news that upends their lives even further. So it's really a story that's in the beginning heartbreaking, but ultimately hopeful, and asks the question, what do we do with the time we have left? And also explores, and I hope evokes a conversation about how motherhood and mothering transcend biology. Do you really have to grow a child in your womb to be a parent? And I would argue no.
What made you choose photography as the lens for the story?
I see what you did there, Terry. That was good. I really felt so the character I wanted to create, my first novel, It Could Be Worse, Allegra is Joy's mother. Allegra was a therapist. Allegra broke a cycle of narcissistic abuse. So Joy was raised by Allegra. Joy was incredibly close to her mother. And with my background as a speech language pathologist, I wanted to weave that in as I did with my first. So Joy was shy. She was bullied a bit as a kid for her speech. Being behind a lens was always more comfortable. She was a creative, but a strong, quiet creative, not someone meek. So that said, when the news hits about her mother and then the news they receive about her husband, she really has to find her voice in a way that her husband was always the big voice, controlling, curated their perfect life. They didn't want for anything financially. And so one of the points of the story also is just because, speaking of photography, things are not always what they seem. And you can change your lens. You could change your worldview. You could change and choose your ending. So you could sit in sorrow, you could sit in sadness, or you can pivot and make choices. And as I wrote in the acknowledgments, I really believe that sometimes a detour actually becomes our destiny. And so for Joy, photography just wasn't enough anymore. And she discovers her mom's camp diary from Camp Intermezzo in Michigan from the 1980s. And one entry stops her in her tracks, Terry. And she gets this amazing idea, goes over to her husband, tells him, he scoffs. What do you know about a business? And she's, let me tell you. And her best friend, Mel, a multi-generation Vermonter, a jeweler, spunky. I hope that's very relatable too in the novel, is that friendship, what I call framily or chosen framily. And Mel is, of course you can do this. So as luck would have it, or fate, or maybe whispers from her mom from another realm, this business, I don't want to earn, it's about 60% of the book, lands in her lap and she pursues it. And all of a sudden you see this woman just blossoming. I wouldn't call it quite a coming of age story, but there's a metamorphosis that's so stunning, I hope. And I felt when I wrote it, while she's grieving, she's transmuting and transforming that grief into this sort of a child of her own, let's say.
We're talking with Dara Levan about her new book, Shaken to the Core. Her website is Dara Levan, DaraLevan.com. The hidden key to Joy's mother's diary is such an evocative image. What did that diary allow you to explore about mothers, daughters, memory, and unfinished conversations?
I love that question. That's a fabulous question. Oh my goodness. And no one's asked that before. So thank you for that also. I think for all of us, no matter what age, gender, background, religion, there's a few things. One, I think at our core, we're all curious beings, some more than others. Clearly, I think we both would agree that we are both very curious. If you're in any sort of journalism or author, why is quite literally one of my favorite questions. It annoys the heck out of my family, but I always need it. I don't want to. I need to know the why. So I think it's very interesting when you stumble upon, it's almost like an artifact. And at first, Joy feels a little weird opening her mom's diary, even though her mom is gone. And in fact, it was thrown in the back of her closet. When someone dies suddenly, and I've had this experience a few times, you're not always thinking straight. So sometimes these little quote unquote meaningless items, they actually become the most important thing. It's all you have left. So something about a diary for me is about legacy. It's about peeking behind the curtain. It's about really getting to know someone that maybe parts of them they weren't willing to share. So I don't feel in this case, especially, I would never encourage or even insinuate that people should snoop through people's diaries. In fact, that's why I don't even journal anymore, to be honest, because unless I can lock it up in a safe, I'm serious. I'm such a curious person. I'm like, someone's going to snoop around my stuff. So that wasn't what happened with Joy. It was like she had her mom's ladybug clock. There were these little things that all of a sudden became everything because it's all she had. So to read her mom's words when her mother was a young teenager at a sleepaway camp, she never knew that about her mom. She didn't know young Allegra. And so it was so connective for her. to be able to get a glimpse into who her mother was when she was a child. And not just that, it sparked this idea that took Joy down a completely different path, which ended up being really beautiful in the end.
How do you approach writing grief in a way that's both honest and still hopeful?
I hope that's what came across when you read the book, because that was my intention. I think that I've had so much loss, Terry. Sudden, I've lost people to cancer. I've lost people very young. I've lost just more of a aging grandparents. And to me, I think if we don't have hope, I don't know how we move forward in life. So in terms of being honest, I know no other way, both on and off the page. Authenticity is one of my core values. And if I wasn't feeling a scene, then I would scrap it. If I didn't get the chills, if I didn't get teary, if it didn't move my heart in some way, it just didn't feel authentic. And so I often think, even with any type of performance, even for a dancer, if you go to the ballet, they're using their bodies to tell a story. And if it, even at that level where there are no words at all, it could also not be believable, because if the story is sad, let's go with grief. And I can go through many examples of that. I think if you don't dig deep into your own reservoir of life experience, it doesn't come across authentic. And if it's not authentic, at least for me as a reader, not even just as an author, then I just want to put the book down.
We're talking about Shaken to the Core by our special guest, Dara Levan. DaraLevan.com is the website. Jane Rosen describes the book as exploring how love, even in its absence, continues to transform us. How does that idea show up in Joy's journey?
I don't want to give it away, but there is a symbol. There's something that appears frequently in the sky. And frankly, that is drawing from my own life experience for sure. My husband's mother, just 6 months before our wedding, died suddenly and tragically. I just turned 24 years old. I was this new fiance, giddy. I was like a big bottle of Prosecco, and I had to tell him. And I took care of him and his whole family. I grew up very quickly. And on the way to her funeral, there was a rainbow. To this day, every single time there's a life event, a passing milestone, a birthday, it is so consistent with myself, my husband, or my children. Every single time a rainbow appears. And I can even call on her. I know this sounds woo, but this is to the point, it's been going on for over 26 years, that I have people around the world sending me rainbows. I just saw a rainbow. I thought of you, Dara. And so I have, not only do I believe, but I have actually personally experienced what I call these visits. And the experiences I've had, I can't make this up. It would make someone who's so not a believer, and I don't even mean religiously, I just mean not a believer in anything otherworldly, stop in their tracks. And I really hope that message came through in Joy's journey grieving her mother, that even though a physical body is gone, and that there's nothing like losing a parent, there's also nothing like losing a child. And I've witnessed that throughout my lifetime with many people close to me. But I do believe if we're receptive, when we have healed at a higher place and our hearts are open, I do believe that we can somehow connect in different ways. It could be through, in my case, also with ladybugs are a huge thing. And that was a theme in the first book, huge and consistent. And dragonflies, it's my husband's grandmother who was like a mother to me. It is so consistent. I feel her. I look outside and there's a swarm of dragonflies. So I do believe it's a receptive thing. I think that when I was in my early 20s and I wanted to cancel the wedding and my husband said no. And all I cared about was he okay? And that changed everything. We had kids younger. What really mattered became so clear going back to the photography and Joy being a photographer. It just, everything that used to matter didn't, and everything that didn't used to matter did.
You host Every Soul Has a Story, where you speak with people from around the world. Has listening to other people's stories shaped the way you write fiction?
That's a beautiful question. I would say yes. And even just my life vision. I've interviewed many people, several authors, but also single fathers, cancer survivors, an extraordinary jeweler, artists. And here, a lot of times people end up sharing their trauma stories with me. And I've always had a deep amount of empathy, but it's fostered even more. And it's also taught me a lot and hearing others' perspectives, which I find fascinating. I don't know that it quite influences my writing per se. If it does, it might be subconscious, but I don't connect with that. For me, it's more worldview, expansiveness, and really fascinating. I've loved to listen to people's stories since I was tiny. I would even when I was 5 years old, I remember vividly being at the grocery store and then just people just started talking to me. And I love, to me, showing up is a very important value. And I was just talking about this a few days ago on a different show that she was asking me a lot about time. I said, that is one thing. Well, there's many things I'm not good at. But one of the biggies that comes to mind is time, because I don't know how much time we have left. And so I always, not always, often, because I'm working on this, I'm often a few minutes late somewhere because I don't want to A, miss a moment, and B, if someone's speaking to me, I hate cutting people off. So I don't know if I answered your question. That was a little bit roundabout, but
You absolutely did. What has been the biggest learning for you from being a podcaster?
the technology, first of all, this started, I'm not kidding. I dropped the phone. This all started in 2020. A lot of my friends kept saying, you should start a podcast. I said, I don't even know how to record something on the TV. I still don't. No interest in it. Zero. So I just jumped on Instagram one day and I called it Wednesday Wisdom Live with Dara. And I just started talking about depression and homeschooling and friendship and just whatever popped in my head. And then all of a sudden people started popping on and coming on. And then I bought a Yeti mic and my husband comes in one day, we're all in lockdown. He says, how do you do that? I said, do what? He said, you just talked about nothing and everything for an hour with nobody. And I said, I don't know. I just speak from my heart. And so that's how every soul has a story started back in 2018 as a blog, 2017 rather. But anyway, yeah, and then it became a podcast, and I've been so grateful to interview people around the world. And I just love sharing their stories because I think we all have so much to learn from each other. And I don't know what's going on in our society in recent years, but there's such a disconnect. And it's so important to me, as long as I'm on the planet, that to connect people both in person, online. I love that too. When I have a friend, I think, oh, you would really connect with this person. I love it making introductions. And I love our author community. They're so supportive. I've met the most wonderful people. And I'm so grateful to be alive. Honestly, I just try to squeeze the juice out of every single minute.
You wrote a powerful story for the anthology on being Jewish now. And when I think about the history of the Jewish people, there were so many times in that history where hope could have evaporated. Where is your source of hope?
That's a great question. It depends on the why and the scenario. So when it comes to my faith and my ancestry, I'm not a religious person, but I'm deeply spiritual. So I think of my ancestors. My grandmother had 9 brothers and sisters when she came to Canada and then to our country. She only had 4 left. So they all persecuted in Nazi Germany. And so when it comes to things like that and a lot of the hate we're seeing, as you know now, the last 2.5 years, it's rampant. My hope comes from my heritage. My hope comes from my ancestors and how they still persevered, and not only persevered, but thrived. Hope when it comes to sickness or grief and loss. I dig deep into these moments where I have these people, I feel like people are never truly gone. I really do. My mother-in-law just died 2.5 years ago of cancer. My uncle of Parkinson's in November. I can go on and on. And people often say, why are you always so happy? And I said, I'm not always happy. I cry, I get angry, I feel all the feels, but I choose joy. And so I consciously believe that is a choice. That doesn't mean to be repressed or toxic positivity or everything's always perfect. I think that's a load of you know what. And I don't believe in curating. People are like, gosh, you're getting a big following on Instagram. I just put on there what inspires me or in the moment but I'm very boundaried with it. My kids, I never share them. They're old enough. They're almost 22 and 24, but that's sacred for me. So I also have a lot of hope when I see somebody get excited about a picture I share, or like you talking about my work. That infuses me with so much hope that there are still good things in the world. And I know there are. We just have to look harder for them lately.
As I hear you talk, I hear echoes of Viktor Frankl and the very powerful message of his that we can't choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond to that. It feels to me like that's at the core of Shaken to the Core. Is that true?
I think that is spot on, Terry. I never thought of it that way. And I think that's a really powerful connection you just made. I appreciate that. Yeah.
What do you hope people will take away from their encounter with the book?
I hope, as is in my first and hopefully all of my future novels and nonfiction, that they feel seen and heard. I know many authors say that, but at an even deeper level, as a former speech language pathologist, I hope they feel really empowered no matter what their challenge is, whether it's a communication challenge or a learning challenge or a physical challenge or a challenge in a relationship. I want people to feel inspired, empowered, and really feel really comforted by the work. And I really hope, specifically with this novel, that no matter what life throws at you, you will get through it. It might take a long time. It's going to hurt. There will be times it's going to really stink, but with community and with being authentic about your emotions, I really believe that we all have the reserves necessary in our well, even in our well of sadness, to find that glimmer and to find that rainbow.
As a podcaster and a podcast guest, you've been asked and have asked tons of questions. Is there a question that you've never been asked that you wish that you had?
Oh, I love that. There's probably so many. Wish that I had asked a guest or wish someone had asked me?
Someone had asked you.
No, because I feel like every conversation, first of all, I feel so honored and grateful that I've had so many people interested in my life because it feels so strange to me. I'm much more interested in sharing other people's stories. So any question anyone asks to me is really humbling. It's an honor and it's a privilege. So really, no, I think everybody's had such thoughtful, interesting questions. And I'm just grateful to even be living this life and getting to do this work because it's my life's passion.
The book is Shaken to the Core. It is one of Zibby's summer reads, so it's something you got to go grab for the beach. I promise you that once you open that book, it's one that's going to keep you up at night, not only because of the important message, but because of the compelling writing. And it was written by our special guest today, Dara Levan. This has been wonderful, Dara. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have to add one exciting piece of news. It was also recommended by the fabulous, amazing Christy Woodson Harvey in People magazine just a few weeks ago. So it's also in People, and I'm really grateful and thankful for people like Christy. She's just a phenomenal human being.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.